talk about is that I do come from the business side, and usually when we talk in presentations like this, there are other like-minded people in the room. So they're either CSR practitioners, they're from NGOs, or they are basically consultants in the sustainability or CSR area. But in reality, when we come to business, the people that we talk to around the table are not these practitioners. The people that we talk to are CFOs and chief investment officers and CEOs, and they have very different hats on, and they talk very different languages. So I'm going to kind of present the history that has evolved over the time, keeping in mind that these are the people that we normally talk to. If I were to present this in 3 phases when it comes to CSR, I would have talked to you about the phase 1 basically being a philanthropy phase, phase 2 being a CSR phase, and maybe phase 3 being a sustainability phase. I am going to talk to you about 3 phases, but I'm going to talk to you in these 3 phases a little bit differently with that hat that I talked to you about, which is the business-minded hat. This is really what, in the past, people used to think about. Okay, they used to say the sole purpose of business is basically making money. Okay, profit making, and that's the sole purpose of business. And if you're actually spending the money of the business in philanthropic or CSR initiatives, then you're not being responsible towards the organization. Do people think like this? Do people in the boards, think like this? I think historically they did, and some maybe even do till today. But then came basically a time when media, started to break out, and any company that was not responsible, and all the history about the Enrons and the Nikes and all of those companies started to break out. Phase 1 for people who basically are CFOs and CEOs, for them it was a time when risk mitigation for them was very important. It wasn't a time for let's do philanthropy or let's do all of this. It's like, how do we now manage the risk, and how do we kind of talk about what we're doing in our organizations so that people feel that we're a little bit more responsible. And they had to basically, put in governance in place to balance some of the things that they do between profit making and giving, and it was really a balancing act for some of these top senior executives and their boards. So governance came out basically to balance between economic and social goals. And I think what we started seeing is companies starting to put these things in their values. So when a CEO talks about the values of the company, he might talk about, I'm inward and externally focused. We are a marketing-driven company or a consumer-driven company. And you saw some of these values starting to trickle into some of the values of the companies. So they started saying we are socially responsible and hanging it on walls. They would say we have respect and tolerance. They would say things like we're an ethical business, we have good corporate governance. And I think this was the first phase of, like I said, balancing between actually making profit and risk mitigation. So that's phase 1. What happened in phase 2 with the business-minded hat on? Actually, sorry, going back to phase 1, and I think that this is something that came up in the first presentation. Thank you very much, but these MDGs guided some of these CEOs and their boards of directors in terms of where to put their money. Right? But what happened to the first MDGs and the set of MDGs is actually they did not achieve their goals. Okay, and the question I always ask is, how many in top management are actually going into their business day in and day out and saying, we would like to solve some of these world problems? We did not achieve these goals because CEOs had this as the last thing in their agenda. You would never see a board of directors meet and basically put in their agenda, what are we doing towards solving some of the global's biggest problems? Okay. It was actually not even the last thing on their agenda. It was one thing that maybe popped up once a year, every 4 or 5 or 6 meetings came up to just kind of discuss it for 20 minutes. So that's phase 1. So it's proven that it's not enough really to have a balance between profit making as well as having some social goals. It's proven that it's not enough to have it in your corporate values to achieve sustainability and profit. It's proven that somebody giving us a list of common goals that we all need to achieve, this is not enough. So what has happened in phase 2 for CSR practitioners when they had to start talking to their CEOs and CFOs, and I think that they started to change their language and tone with their CEOs, and basically they started saying, you know what, maybe they're interested in share prices, maybe they're interested in numbers and facts and figures. And these practitioners started talking to their CEOs and they started providing numbers, and these numbers were basically reflecting the increase in share price if you are a responsible company. They started to show increase in share price if you're responsible and good to the environment, and they started sharing these numbers. So what CFOs and CEOs started to do during this phase is they basically started to give a little bit of money. Basically CSR practitioners shared these numbers in relation to profits, but they also shared some numbers in relation to consumers. So they talked about younger consumers coming in, and these younger consumers are actually more responsible, they are more educated, they want to see green products, they want to see better products, etc. So CSR practitioners started sharing some of these numbers with their CFOs. So CFOs started to realize, maybe we should invest in environmentally friendly products, better products that the consumers are aware of. And lastly, even from an HR perspective, I think the language and the tone has changed, whereby numbers, facts, and figures started to be shared between CSR practitioners with the board of directors, and they started sharing numbers in relation to employees not minding a 15% pay cut if the company practiced CSR, or if the companies basically had similar values to them as employees. So with all of this data and CSR coming on board and them sharing these figures with their CFOs, I think the second phase is basically a phase where you started seeing investing in this area. You started seeing investing in putting up departments. By the way, I'm from Saudi Arabia, and the company that I work for is a Saudi company, and I was very surprised to hear that there are only about 60 companies in Saudi Arabia that have a CSR department. Okay. That's a very, very low number if you talk about a country the size of Saudi Arabia. So what do I call phase 2? I think phase 2 is a phase of where these top management started to basically invest, but invest shyly in